meeting of the Grafton Planning Board, September 12th, 2022, to order. The first agenda item.
Recording in progress.
Yep, yes.
There.
All right.
Now we're online.
Now we're online. Okay.
Too many.
Let me just get up one thing. I forgot my script. Okay. Pursuant to Chapters 20 of the Acts of 2021, the meeting of the Grafton Planning Board is being conducted with both in-person and remote participation by board members and members of the public. Remote participation by the public for the public comment agenda item, the public hearings, and any other matter for which the board allows public participation will be via the Zoom raise hand feature. If you raise your hand on Zoom, you will be enabled at an appropriate point to enter the meeting via voice or video to make a comment or ask a question. In all cases, whether in person or remote, please identify yourself by name and address for the record. Every vote will be taken by roll call. Please note that the meeting is being recorded as well as being broadcast live on the Grafton Community Television Government Channel. I'll take the roll call of the board to check that everyone's here and can hear us well. Mr. Robbins?
Mr. Robbins is present.
Mr. Hassinger?
I'm here.
Ms. Hassinger?
Here.
Mr. Venkatraman?
Here.
All right. And our associate member, Maura McCormack?
Here.
And staff president, Natalia Alward?
Present.
And Chris McGoldrick is here in the room.
Present.
Our first agenda item is an executive session. Anyone want to make a motion to enter it?
I think the law says you're supposed to declare why we need it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I
You
think you're
found
right,
that
but
it needs.
the template that Natalia posted online said motion first. So, anyway, so the first item is an executive session for today, September 12th, 2022, for the sole purpose of discussing strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation position of the public body. With regards to Brigati Village, multifamily development, 41 Church Street and 14 West Street.
I'll move that the board enter into executive session for the purpose just stated.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to enter the executive session. I'll take the roll call of the board. Mr. Robbins?
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger?
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger?
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman?
Aye.
And I vote aye. The board will now enter executive session. We will reconvene in our regular public meeting at the conclusion of the session. Let's take to make sure everyone can hear each other well. Mr. Robbins?
Present.
Mr. Hassinger?
I'm here.
Ms. Hassinger?
Here.
Mr. Venkatraman?
Present.
And Ms. McCormack?
Here.
Thank you. All right. Thank you for bearing with us. We'll just get to the public hearing in a moment, but just the first thing on our agenda, as always, is public input. Does anyone have anything to bring to the planning board's attention that is not already on the agenda tonight? And seeing none, and knowing that it's past 7:30 now, we'll just get into our public hearing, which is a request for special permit and site plan approval at 16 Morgan Drive.
Pursuant to sections 1.5.7 and 3.2.3.1 of the Town of Grafton zoning bylaws, the planning board will hold a public hearing on Monday, September 12th, 2022, commencing at 7:30 p.m. in Conference Room A at the Grafton Memorial Municipal Center, 30 Providence Road, to consider the application for a special permit and site plan approval request for the keeping of 3 domestic geese on less than 5 acres on property located at 16 Morgan Drive, shown as Grafton Assessors Map 31, Lot 107. Said property is located in a low-density residential R40 zoning district. The applicant/owner is Jean Marie Houghton. A copy of the application/plan is available for public inspection at the planning department during regular business hours or on the Town of Grafton website at www.grafton-ma.gov on the planning department/development projects webpage.
And as you introduce us, Chris, I did just notice that Mr. Berger is on the Zoom as an attendee in case you want to bring him in case he has more to add.
I could do that. One second. Okay. Yep. So just kind of introducing this application. So this was kind of brought to the attention. My understanding of the matter was brought to the attention of the building inspector of the keeping of geese on this property. The applicant was notified that as the parcel is under the 5 acre, which would be the agricultural exemption, that a special permit was required. The applicant has submitted that application as is noted tonight. The application is to allow the keeping of 3 domestic geese on that the subject property, which is again less than 5 acres, requiring the special permit. As kind of, I think, included in the exhibits tonight, you'll see that there has been documentation submitted by both the Board of Health and I believe the comments from the animal control officer has been included as well. In looking at those, I think the regulations and what was provided from those is certainly something that can be included as conditions of an application, but beyond that, that's kind of the gist of it for tonight. And if the applicant wants to kind of discuss more in terms of the specifics of the proposal.
Do we have the applicant in the room or on the call?
Excuse me?
I was saying, do we have the applicant in the room or on the call? I'm sorry.
So I'm the owner of the home, and my daughter Amanda is on the Zoom call.
If you want to come up to either sit down or stand at the podium so everyone can hear you if you do speak, that'd be wonderful.
I'm pretty loud.
Is it what's the name of?
Amanda Kim and Jean Marie Houghton.
I have a Rick and then a Literacy Volunteers of Greater Worcester. Do you know?
Oh, that could be. I'm Amanda's sister. I've used Zoom with that. It might be her. I'm not sure though.
Which one? The Literacy?
Literacy Volunteers of Greater Worcester.
Procedurally, Amanda, if you're on the call, can you please press the raise hand feature?
She texted me that she can hear us. Oh, there's Literacy Volunteer?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's her. Mindy, can you turn your camera on, please, just for a moment? We're not sure where you are on here. Can you unmute yourself and speak?
Well, we'll leave her as a panelist for now, but if you want to go ahead and kind of present the application.
Okay. How would you like me to do this, please?
Yeah, so, if you have any other details that you wanted to cover in terms of the application.
Sure. So in May of last year, unbeknownst to me, we acquired, there she is. Unbeknownst to me, we acquired some geese. After we got the geese, Amanda had looked into the rules in Grafton for geese. We were able to find that up to 6 chickens were allowed, but no roosters. There were rules against donkeys and goats and a few other animals. We could not find any information about geese. We went on to the Massachusetts webpage in general and found that domestic geese were allowed on property. I did not find any information on size limitations. I did speak to another resident of Grafton who I noticed had geese in her yard. And when I spoke to her, I didn't specifically ask her about a special permit because I didn't even know that that was a thing. But she led me to believe that geese and chickens were fine, and her property was much smaller than our property. So it was my mistake and my misassumption, but I assumed that we were well within our rights to have the animals on the property. Mr. Berger sent me a letter telling me that we were in need of a special permit in order to keep these animals. And I contacted him within a week of getting that letter and got the ball rolling for getting the permit. It is a very laborious and difficult application to go through with all the different departments involved and the different steps involved. And it took a lot longer than we had anticipated, but I can give you a timeline of almost weekly contact with various members of the different departments between my daughter and myself to get this going and to get this moving.
Thank you. Any comments, questions from the board so far?
On the submission, I see we do not have a site plan. Is that correct?
There is a site plan.
No, an engineered site plan signed.
Yeah, so what was provided was a photo of the coop enclosure, but there is no engineered site plan for the keeping of the animals provided.
One of the reasons for that is that there are zoning laws about how close structures can be to the property line. And some of the comment we have suggests that this is adjacent to the property line, not the required distance away, which might be another issue. And we need that. The site plan would show us the actual distances from the houses to one another and to the coop and all of that.
So I guess that would be something that if the applicant is willing to have a site survey done in order to have those plans drawn up.
Yeah, I think the point is that there was a waiver asked. At the moment, though, I couldn't vote for the waiver because there do seem to be open questions that it addresses.
Understood.
So there is a diagram that was provided to us showing the existing structures. My house, the pool house behind my house, and then structures beyond that. We have photographs of the coop within that structure, which should provide all that information that's required, if that would be acceptable.
How far is that from this?
This diagram, is that the one that shows the coop with a picture of a duck?
I believe so, but I would have to see. If it was created by your group, yes. Because there was also a picture that was created by Charlie, and the coop is not located in the proper spot in that picture.
I don't understand what you just said. Oh, you're talking about a drawing, not this photograph.
No. There's a drawing that.
Right. That's not an engineered drawing. The neighbor has complained that the coop is right on the property line. There's no way to tell from a sketch about that.
The one I was talking about, Chris, is in Exhibit 1, is the last page.
Yeah, okay.
What is the regulation for a setback for a non-permanent structure?
Well, I think the the zoning enforcement officer is available.
Might be able to answer that.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Bob.
Mr. Chair, through the chair, the setbacks are 30 from the front, 15 from the side, and 10 from the rear.
Thank you. Yeah, that was the drawing I was.
Yes, that is the drawing. So the front structure closest to me, closest to the street, is my house.
Okay.
The back structure is our pool house,
Yeah.
and the coop is the duck.
One of the problems with this, which I can tell you it's from the GIS system of the state, is the property lines in this system are approximate, and I've seen them be wrong by over 10 feet themselves. That's why that's one of the reasons we like engineer drawings. For example, this is a good approximation. It's good to see who are your neighbors who own property adjacent to you, things like that. But it is not really great to say, okay, well, this thing is within a setback.
I could probably point out that sorry, I lost my train of thought. Never mind.
Mr.
I thought I
Mr.
had
Chair,
something to say, but I didn't, so I'll keep my mouth shut.
Go ahead, Mr. Berger.
basically, I would say that this is like the accessory apartment. You're trying to grant a permit for the use, and if you do grant them a permit for the use of raising livestock, then they would need to pull a permit, maybe a zoning permit if the structure is under 200 square feet. And that would be the inspector of buildings to make sure that it does meet its setbacks. So this is, I would think this is just phase one. And phase two is the applicant, after she gets through this process, would need to permit the structure itself. And that's when we can verify it does meet its proper setbacks.
That's what I was starting to say, and then I lost my train of thought. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
The thing is that the key vote here is one of the 1.5 dot whatever it is requirements, which is compatibility with abutters and other properties in the area. And we have a strong input suggesting that it, declaring that it is not compatible with the immediate neighbor. So knowing, actually having measurements, the measurements would include a site plan should show the distance to the neighbor's house also, if I'm not mistaken. In any case, that's information we might want to consider. I would want to consider anyway in the decision. Justin, someone dropped an image of a duck on an image.
Yes.
That's got nothing to do with accurate measurements.
Exactly.
Yeah, that shows an approximate location, but ultimately for the, and again, as Mr. Berger pointed out, that if the board approves this, there is still a further requirement to get the appropriate zoning permit or building permit depending on the size, and that's something you would work, you contact Mr. Berger's office about which permit you need, and that's, in any case, that's a minimum requirement for satisfying as a minimum setback. Now, this board may, I suppose it's possible for this board to say we think an additional setback is required. In similar cases, we've not done geese before in the time I've been on the board. I don't remember doing one of these for geese, but we've done a similar permit in a number of cases for keeping of horses on a lot of under 5 acres. And pretty consistently in those permits, we've included conditions regarding the proper management of the horses, proper management of things like management of manure, odor, noise. So that those sort of general considerations for keeping of livestock, which you don't normally think of geese as livestock, but they are included in the definition in the use table. Similar considerations regarding management of the animals, in sanitary, odor, noise, all that. We would expect there to be some standards, some well understood standards to which you would be expected to conform. So the details of those, probably the animal inspector can go into more detail about that. But I think the general considerations are similar here as we've had in the past for the keeping of horses.
And goats.
Probably odors, some of these issues are less of a concern for geese than they would be for horses, but still it kind of gets to consideration of the neighboring properties as well.
And on the idea of compatibility, just a few thought just to ask them out loud is, are you aware of any other neighbors in your like perimeter of your house, so to speak, that picture basically, that have any sort of livestock, whether it be chickens, geese, or any other animals?
There are horses, a couple doors down on Old Westboro Road. There's a large horse farm there.
Okay.
Holden Farm across the street from us has horses, goats, several other animals. One of the houses on that same road has chickens. So there are multiple examples of animals very close.
Yeah, I suspected that in that area, but I just wanted to check with you as well. In the exhibits we have, I believe it was the animal control communication thread, but I could be misremembering that. But when they visited your home, they said no one was home, but they saw the geese roaming.
No one answered the door. My
Yeah.
daughter was home.
But yeah, my main question is more with the geese roaming, how do they ever leave your property, and if not, how is that
How do we accomplish that?
yes.
Okay. So when they were very little, we actually walked them around the property. Like, they would follow me. They imprinted very well. There have been maybe 2 or 3 occasions where they've wandered onto a neighbor's yard, a couple feet off of ours. We see them, we bring them back. I would say in the last several months, they stay within their boundaries very, very well. They know the property lines. They will fly from one end of the property to the other. They drop down. They walk back. They know their coop. They know when we lead them in at night, they don't go to bed. They're very docile and easy to corral.
And
They're not let loose when we're not home.
on a typical, I want to say like week, how often are they outside of their coop? Is it majority like during the sun's up, someone's home, they're out, or is it?
If someone is home, they are out. By our work schedules, there's usually somebody home either in the morning hours or in the afternoon hours, so they're out most every day for a few hours.
Okay. That's what I had in my head right now. Anything further from the board? Alright, so this is a public hearing. Is there any members of the public who want to speak to this application, either for or against, any concerns, questions?
I have a question for Ms. Houghton. Did you say you got the geese in May of this year?
No.
Uh,
Of the previous year.
Before?
I'm sorry, can you just come to a microphone
Oh, sure.
to speak so that people on Zoom can also hear you?
Sure.
Thank you.
No, my name is Deb Adcock, and I was just trying to find out when Ms. Houghton said the geese arrived, because I thought she said it was this past May, and I
No,
was,
May of last year.
yes. And then we discovered them several months after that, when the noise became, it's really unbearable, especially trying to sleep at night, Jean. It's terrible.
I wish you had come and spoke to me
Well,
directly.
I wish you had come and spoke to us.
Sorry, this is
because
a
I hear about
discussion
it.
between 2 people.
Okay.
It needs to be,
Okay.
comments need to be directed through the
Sorry.
chair.
No, but nobody came to the abutters. And the timeline that Ms. Houghton is giving herself is very generous. She didn't immediately respond to complaints. And when she heard that neighbors were having concerns, she didn't go around and come to any of the neighbors. Certainly not to us, and we're the closest. And we're probably closer to that geese coop than she is, because it is on the property line.
Okay,
My
so
husband built the house. He knows the property lines very well, which I know is just like a duck on a map. But I'm telling you, it's on the property line. But no, she never came to us to discuss any complaints, concerns. And once those geese in the fall started their squawking and their noise, now I've got coyotes in my yard. I've lived for 22 years at the same address. No coyotes, ever. And I'm sure they're out there at night. I'm not saying they don't exist, but on a weekly basis, sometimes twice in a day, I would have coyotes at my front door, my garage door. I try to leave my home, and I can't because and these aren't little coyotes. These are, I've had a 70-pound dog, and these are bigger than that. And they're very well fed. And they just look at me like, yeah, try to get to your car. Try to get to your yard. I have grandchildren that I don't feel safe with in my yard. I have to carry a dog horn to scare any coyotes away. And it's gonna start up again, cause fall's coming. That's why I'd really like to get this settled, because I don't wanna go through another winter trying to walk my dog. I have to walk my dog in my yard now on a leash, because she's 16 pounds. That coyote could take her like nobody's business. I got grandkids that are 4 and 6. They like to wander through the woods, through our yard. We don't feel safe in our yard. I can't sleep at night. I haven't had a consistent night's sleep in months since these things came. And as I mentioned in my letter, I have a chronic health condition. Lack of restorative sleep is not conducive to what I struggle with. But it's the safety and the noise. I can't understand why it doesn't bother the owner, because the noise, it's 5 in the morning, it's 1 in the morning. Fisher cats, coyotes, fox, they're all drawn to the coop. And squawk, squawk, screaming, all the animals at night. I close the window, I have to put a fan on, and still I can hear the noise. And so I really would have appreciated, because like I said, this has gone on many more steps than Ms. Houghton described. It wasn't like, oh, I didn't know when I got a letter. You find out from the town, you take the right steps, you don't go by what neighbors say. You call the town, you make a simple phone call. Can I have geese under 5? Okay, I need a special permit, I'll start working on that. I'll talk to my neighbors. But that's not what happened. And letters went out more than once that she ignored. She was threatened with fines and still ignored. And she didn't come around to talk to any of us. No concern whatsoever. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
So,
Thank you for your words.
so within a week of Mr. Berger contacting me, I called him back and we got on a Zoom meeting and we started the process. I was told of an anonymous complaint. I was not told who the complainer was, and the complaint was attracting predators. There was no other component to this complaint at all. We spoke to the neighbors on both sides of us, no complaints. We spoke to 3 houses across the street from us. They had no concerns either. We did speak to the abutters. I didn't include you as an abutter. I didn't.
Sorry, through me, please.
I'm sorry, I didn't speak to the complaint as an abutter because I honestly thought they were too far away.
We are not too far away. We're
I'm
closer
sorry.
than anyone else. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be out of order, but
Please,
what she's
no,
saying isn't
sorry.
true.
When the chairman
Yep,
recognizes
got
you,
it,
you'll be able
got
to
it.
speak
No,
again.
okay.
It was not a direct omission to be cruel, to be mean, to be disrespectful or anything else. It was something we didn't even have on our radar to consider. So to say that we didn't speak to any of our neighbors is incorrect because we spoke to the majority of the neighbors. I'm sorry we missed them. If I had known who the complaint was from, it would have given me the opportunity to address it with the person who raised it. But they chose to complain anonymously and did not give me that option. As far as coyotes, fox, fisher cats, everything else in the area, those have been here for years. We've not seen any evidence of them around the coop. We check for things daily. There has been no digging. There has been no problems with someone trying to get in the coop. We don't see them in our yards at all. None of our neighbors that we have spoken to have seen them in their yards. We do hear the fisher cats off in the distance, but that's always been. We did hear a pack of coyotes several months ago. Again, several houses down. It's terrifying to listen to, but it was nowhere near our animals, and I can't imagine our geese somehow above and beyond the cows, the horses, the chickens, the goats, and everything else that's in the area are the reason that these things are being drawn in.
My only comment to say is that, yes, anybody, doesn't have to be a buddy of yours, could drive by, see the geese, hear it, not like it, make a complaint. It's anyone has the right to do that anonymously.
I agree with you. But to expect me to be able to address that person not knowing where it's coming from is above and beyond my capabilities. We spoke to everybody that we felt would be likely impacted.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we didn't include a wide enough radius, and that's my mistake, but it was not intentional.
I think where the notification concern is coming from is just that it is in our bylaws to notify. That's part of this public hearing process, and that's what to go out. But would I be a neighbor and not have been told? And guess I'd be frustrated or upset, but yeah, I could see both sides of that of that part of it, and it's not really relevant to us making a decision, on this matter. It's the concerns go to compatibility still, but yes.
I just checked, and that coop is approximately 120 feet from the neighbor's house.
Not from the property line.
That's certainly stopped conversation.
Mm-hmm.
What did you use to check it, Bob?
Matt Geo.
Okay. All right. Is there anything further from the board or any other members of the public?
Yes.
Come on up to the microphone, please.
Thank you, board members. I appreciate the opportunity to address the panel here.
Who?
I'm sorry?
Could you state your name for the record?
Charles Adcock.
Thank you.
I'm at 116 Old Westboro Road. I am the closest abutter to the pen of geese. The closest. She claims she made all this effort to contact all the abutters, but being the closest one, it's surprising to me that we didn't get contacted. She's refused to do procedurally what is required by the town to house geese and wildlife like this. And it hasn't been done. I believe still exists the 5-acre minimum, irregardless of how many other contacts she's made with other people, and hoping to do so in such a manner that allows her to keep the geese, but it's still 5 acres. And the noise is something that is very objectionable. The proximity to that lot line is almost within 10 feet, if not right on the property line. She has a pool house that sits a little further back than the geese pen, which is right up against the property line. And the geese house pen is even closer. It's not even in line, so it's a little closer to the property line. And the fact that we do attract more elements of different kind of wildlife is very, very obvious. Sure, they've been around a lot longer than any development, Toll Brothers included. Even before us, we came in even before Toll Brothers. We had a nice quiet setting. We do not have that nice quiet setting now, and we expect that any person attempting to house wildlife would go by procedural regulations set by this town. Therein lies my argument. It's not 5 acres that she has, so she's under the limit quite a bit of what is required. That's all I'd like to say.
Thank you.
Point of clarification on that particular point. On a parcel over 5 acres, raising and keeping of livestock is allowed without any permits. It's just allowed by right.
Over 5 acres?
Over 5 acres.
Yes.
Under 5 acres is why we are here.
Correct.
Under 5 acres, you are allowed raising and keeping of livestock, including, among other things, poultry. On a parcel under 5 acres is allowable by special permit. So this is the special permit that's being applied for here.
I understand that. But if there is no immediate need to have livestock for any other purpose than self-satisfaction, why would it be allowed? How can it be possibly allowed if the 5 acre law exists?
The 5 acres is a different thing. The 5 acre threshold is partly imposed by state law. Anything over 5 acres, any kind of agriculture on over 5 acres, you're allowed to do without any permission from the town. Under 5 acres, you're allowed to do it with permission from the town. And that's why we're here.
Okay. Okay.
And we have a whole list of things we have to look at when we consider whether, that's why it's a special permit.
Right, it's a special, we have the discretion to allow it or not allow it. But it is possible for the town, and I mentioned before, this is the same provision that allows people to keep horses on less than 5 acres.
I see.
And here we're dealing with geese. We more frequently deal with horses. That's the most common application. of
Understood.
this.
Yeah, they've been on either side of our property from before we moved in. What I would probably like to stress with this board is that in so many cases where she was made aware of complaints, why she went to such extent to ignore them and to ignore a procedure that is common to people getting along, neighbors being friendly with neighbors. We were never contacted, never made an attempt to be contacted. And that's the point I'd like to make also. If she went with procedure, that's one thing, but she thwarted procedure. She ignored warnings. She ignored notices. I'd like you to have that weigh heavy on your ultimate decision.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I was aware of one complaint. I responded to that one complaint with Mr. Berger within a week. We have been in contact with various members of the town on a weekly or bi-weekly basis to move this application along. And we spoke to all of our neighbors that we felt were involved, and I admit I excluded Charlie, not on purpose.
I'm just gonna stop you there. I'm sorry that we just don't need to repeat the same stuff. You've already said that. We are
Okay.
we're well aware of your version of what happened there.
Yes.
When were you notified? Was that the 22nd of January?
That was the 26th of January, yes.
26th of January. It's now September. What did Mr. Berger say on the 26th of January?
He told me, I did not speak to him on the 26th. I received a letter. I spoke to
What
him
did he
on
say?
February 4th. And on
What
February
in-
4th, we had a meeting where he described to me what we would need to do for a special permit. He
On the
then said,
26th of January, what did he say?
He didn't.
What did he say in his letter?
his letter said that we needed to contact the town to discuss further, which I did.
Did he say that you were violating anything?
Yes, the housing of geese. That I
Yeah,
needed to call the town and discuss with him what needed to be done.
And now it's September. That's a kind of a problem.
So we have contact on January 26th, February 4th, February 15th, March 3rd, March 4th, March 6th, March 7th, March 12th, March 24th, April 7th, April 16th, April 28th, and then 6th through the 20th of this past year, when we finally were able to complete all of the paperwork and get everything we needed to submit the application. So this has not sat idle. This has been a constant back and forth with various departments to get this moved along.
I don't understand. It's easy enough to apply for a special permit. They have a form you can write out by hand in the office.
That
in
is
any
not
case-
true. I'm sorry to disagree with
Wait
you.
a minute. They have a form in the office that you can write out by hand to make your application. Is that not true, Chris?
That is correct.
But you cannot submit the application until you have all the parts completed.
That is also correct. There's supplemental information such as the certificate of good standing and the abutters list that needs to be acquired.
And
Which
how
is awesome.
long do those take to get, Chris?
I can't say, but I believe it's been between 3 days to a week to get those.
Right. In any case, the base point is compatibility. We have discretion, but it's bound by a whole group of requirements in 1.5.1, I think it is 1.5 dot something of the zoning law. And one of them is compatibility. I don't see how we can find that with what we just heard. The bylaw, there's never any question about whether it was required or not. The bylaw says if you want to do any raising and keeping of livestock, including but not limited to horses, cattle, sheep, goats, swine, fur animals, and poultry on a parcel under 5 acres, you need a special permit. That's been there. There's another place in the bylaw where we added a provision for backyard chickens, but that is not relevant to this. It's a cushion, a way around for female backyard chickens up to 6, I think. Okay.
Is there any additional information the board believes they need to receive on this?
I have a question,
Go ahead,
Justin, if I may. So is there an wooded area between Dr. Horton's home and the Adcock's home? Is there a wooded area? When I look at the Google Maps, it looks like there is a wooded area.
Come on up. Go ahead.
There is some woods, and it's much better in the summertime when the trees are full and leafy. It's not all evergreen. So that buffer goes away. Any buffer we have goes away in the fall.
Okay. That's what I had. Thank you.
As Dave was saying, is there anything more the board needs to make a determination on this request? This application.
The place I was talking about is actually 1.5.5. One of the screening buffering is D, and E is compatibility and harmony with properties of the district. Yes, I'll have to vote against the waiver of the plan, and if it doesn't get waived, it can't be approved because the submission requirement wasn't met. Applicant's choice.
I'm not sure I understand that.
So what's being discussed is, so there's a requirement for a site plan to be provided, a fully engineered site plan to be provided.
That was not a requirement when I was given the application.
It's on the application form, but a waiver has been requested, and so we accept the application without it, pending the board's review of it.
Okay.
So there's the option you can provide an engineered plan of the coop and the area that the board finds sufficient under their criteria, or sufficient for their purposes of rendering the decision, or you can proceed without it, knowing that one member has already expressed he will vote against the waiver. If you have 2 votes against that, it fails.
It's also probably true that the building department will ask for a plan showing the property boundaries, showing the distance, the setbacks from the property. So they're going to want that information in any case before they can issue a zoning permit or a building permit, whichever turns out to be appropriate. So sooner or later, if this goes forward, you are going to be asked for a plan showing how far away this is from the property boundaries. If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Berger could correct me if I'm wrong on that. But my experience with the building department is that they, if you're proposing to put any kind of an accessory structure in your yard, they want to, they want documentation that it's going to be sufficiently far away from the property boundaries.
Do you need a property setback for a doghouse?
Actually, technically, yes.
Mr. Berger?
It's an accessory.
I would say if it was so far away I would not require a certified plot plan. But if we're talking feet, then yes, I would require a certified plot plan.
Yeah, so you would be looking for documentation sufficient to demonstrate that the setback requirement has been met.
Oh, absolutely.
So as a minimum, I think this, this board, it sounds like we would at least like something, whatever documentation the building department would be asking for. Normally we look for a certified, surveyed plan.
Good, Chris.
And through the chair again, how far away is the scoop from the property line right now?
Exactly. That has to be in a site plan, doesn't it?
It does, but she might have a number, so I was just
I do.
curious.
It's 7.5 feet off the property line.
And if that's a side property line, then that does not meet our setbacks. Our setbacks are 15 from the side, 10 from the rear, and 30 from the front. So if that was going to be right on the 15-foot side or the 10 rear, I would want a certified plot plan for the proposed location. If it was 40 feet from the side and 40 feet from the rear, then we all know that they're not near their property line, and I would let that go with some other type of documentation other than a certified plot plan. But because we're going so close to the setback, I would be requiring a certified plot plan to show me the proposed location. I hope that answers your question, Mr. Chair.
Answers my question, yes. So, go ahead, Chris.
What I would suggest in terms of a certified plot plan versus the typical engineered drawings that are requirements for the planning board, I may suggest that if the board may find that a certified plot plan is sufficient, but still grant the waiver, as there's certainly more engineering requirements as outlined in the application for a site plan that would be required. And then maybe, frankly, overdone for an application of this caliber.
I think if nothing else, to go back to Mr. Hasinger's point, that the board should be more comfortable knowing, having some documentation as to exactly how far this structure, such as it is set back from the property lines.
The side property lines have recently been surveyed because of the sale of a house, so they're currently marked.
Yeah, but we would need the survey that shows your property lines in the rear, and decide to in relation to this.
Yeah, the structure has to be located, and that's usually done by an engineer. I think it's necessary to be done by an engineer, qualified engineer, and signed. Not just go out there and make a
State
rough.
who you are for the record.
Melinda McKendrick, I'm your animal control officer, and an animal inspector. However, in Grafton, you've split the duties into two positions.
Yes.
Animal inspector and barn inspector. Your barn inspector, Jay Husson, is also here. I would just like to make a couple of, as quick as I can, comments.
Absolutely.
As animal control, when anybody calls me and makes a complaint, I keep it anonymous. It is just usually better that way. I would not go and tell, if you had contacted me, I would not go and tell her that you're the person that called. What I would do, because it's a livestock issue, is I would actually contact the barn inspector. I actually don't have that in my notes. Sometimes people say, please don't put anything in your notes, so it's not there. But I also don't have anything in the animal control notes of noise complaints. So they've not been coming to me specifically, which is fine. It would normally go to building or your barn inspector. I brought with me some sheets on coyotes in Massachusetts. I'm gonna give you one. They're here.
I've got
You have it?
Thank you.
I brought them just for information for everybody. I don't know who wants them. Regardless of what else is here, we have Fisher cats that have moved into the area. There's a couple of bears in town. There's coyotes, there's fox. The geese and the chickens and other livestock are not attracting them. They're here, they're moving in because we're encroaching on their spaces and they're finding other places to go. I just spoke a little bit with Christopher earlier. This time of year specifically, some of the coyote families begin to break up. So you're going to see more activity specifically this time of year because the teenage boy coyotes especially are getting booted out. They need to find new territory. So there's a lot more activity right now going on. It will die off a little bit, but there's a whole bunch of coyote information. I'm sorry, the geese aren't attracting them to the area.
to talk to her since
I-
she's talking to me?
No.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Please come up.
Well, I would just say to that, I live there.
Yep.
I live there.
Yep.
22 years, no coyotes. And when the coyotes come through my yard, they go right to the geese. They go right there.
Don't.
I mean, they're an attraction. They're an enticement. You might say they're not attracted to poultry,
No,
but maybe it's the
that's
smells.
not what I'm
maybe
saying.
it's the cage. I don't know what it is, but I've
Again,
seen it.
I'm gonna have to.
Again, I'm sorry.
write this.
What?
In-
No, I've seen it.
It's not a dialogue between two people. All comments need
Oh,
to be directed.
But you said I could come up and talk to her.
Yeah, but
Well,
that's
just
not
speak
the way
to the
that.
board. The
You guys gotta
coyotes.
put protocol lists somewhere so I can review it next time before we have to do a meeting because I'm not very good at this. I apologize.
The coyotes are here in population. The populations are growing, regardless, really, of what's there for specific animals. They go after cats. They'll go for small dogs. They go after rats, geese, bunnies, hawks, whatever they can get. They're opportunistic. That's part of why I brought a few copies of the Fisheries and Wildlife fact sheet on coyotes, just so that you can have them. And there's a couple of people. I don't know if you specifically want them. I'll leave them here on the desk for whoever wants.
I would like to say one last thing too, is that I don't think I spoke to you about the noise complaint. It was probably the barn inspector. We've talked about noise complaints in more than once. And I think we did speak about that and the noise and the lack of sleep and everything. It wasn't just coyotes.
Oh, yeah.
Because the noise has been the first issue. The coyotes came second, and it's been it's very trying. And I would encourage all of you to go on YouTube, play some geese sounds, and imagine having to listen to that at unpredictable hours every day. And when you do hear the fisher cats going out there, they're right in the back. I know what attracts them during the day, so I'm assuming the same thing attracts them at night. But listen to that, and think about what it's been like if you had to listen to that for the past year, when you're trying to sleep, when you're trying to take a nap, or when you don't know if it's fall now and there's going to be a coyote greeting you and your grandkid as you go out to go play in the yard. I'm done. Thank you.
I have no complaints in my records.
Thank you.
Oh, before she gets away,
Yes.
just, I often hear people say that geese are quite loud, as a rule. Would you agree with that? Maybe louder than some other of the animals we talk about?
It's difficult to determine.
Okay.
Generally, most birds go to sleep after dark. Sometimes a rooster will go off, and that's why you have a ban on roosters. Westboro just passed some poultry regulations, which I would only recommend as a guide if you were interested. I did not ban roosters because if they can be maintained in a way that keeps them quiet in the evening and they're not bothering anybody. So there may be things that the board can do to help silence noise. Hopefully that provides a good answer for you.
Guess as good as we're gonna get. Thank you.
Joe Hudson, Graft Inspector of Animals. I did receive the complaint from the Health Department, Nancy Connors, on the 18th of January, in which I did do an inspection of prior to that, I did meet with Mrs. Adcock, and we talked and walked her property. It is in her property is wooded. She explained that the geese were making noises and bringing in the coyotes, and I did explain at that time that it's really not that. It's more like Melinda said, the developments that are going in, and they're going to be there no matter what. But that I would go and I would inspect the property and I would report back into the health department. which I did that same day. I did go see the property and check the enclosure and the areas for the geese. They met me in the driveway and kind of walked me to the door, and I did not, because I do that. I try to get in somebody to come out with me. No one answered the door, so I checked out the enclosure. Everything was clean. There was heated water. There was food. There was adequate shelter, and it was able to be closed off. I understand now it's also netted on top to protect it from anything flying in or out. I don't represent I represent the town and everybody in the town. So that's so I'm not, there's no side taking or anything like that. And I did say that the animals were unpredictable, coyotes and anything else. Anything can happen. They jump fences 6 feet high. They do all kinds of things. And the geese are very healthy, as far as I could tell. They looked very good, and everything was pretty much copacetic on that end. So I put my report in. I did get another call from, I believe, Mr. Adcock had left a message on my machine. I tried calling back once, and he had asked what the progress was. I think I did talk to him once and told him that it was in the zoning enforcement officer's hands, and that he was addressing it with a letter from town council or from him requiring them to have to receive a special permit to actually have the geese. And that was the only complaint I had. I didn't have any other complaints anywhere else, but I just need to note that. And I also keep things anonymous purposely, because that's not for me to send out, it's for the other officials.
Absolutely understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, I think from what I've heard from the board, the thing that we have one person saying they would vote against the waiver. No stated opinion from the rest of the board on whether they vote against the waiver or not, but it seems like it would be in your best interest, if you wanted to maintain keeping the geese to get the special permit approved, to submit to the board through the town, through Chris's office, the planning department, a surveyed, thing that's showing, like we discussed, and also do a formal request to continue the public hearing, which you can make tonight. If Chris has a form, he can hand you a form. Otherwise, we can do an email. I think he needs the email. Looking at his screen.
Yeah, I don't have it on my hand right now.
We can just do an email to have that in writing that you requested. You'll state it out loud here. Then we will have you on an upcoming public meeting of the planning board to continue this public hearing. At which point we'd have, that survey, and we would expect to have that survey, as well as any other further, testimony from the public, or you to, continue to state your case, ideally in ways we have not already heard tonight.
Okay, I would like to do that. May I ask through the board, Charlie, one question? Or one statement and a question, which I think will be helpful?
Sure.
So when we built the pool house, I know you were very concerned about your view, because you built very far back on your property line, and you had never anticipated all those woods being taken down. And I was very, very sympathetic to that. And to keep your view as pristine as possible, I put in 6 18-foot evergreen trees between the pool house and the back property line.
Keep putting all your leaves on our property. I think you asked them not to do too, so.
Excuse me, it's not a discussion between.
So I think what I was able to do was to find a way to have your view and your experience in your backyard maintained to the best of the ability, while also having my property used for what I want it for.
I'm not sure.
Yep.
I would like to know if we could work somehow with more sound control with evergreen trees, since one of the statements was in the fall when the leaves come down, we're lacking that buffer. And I am very willing to help put up more of a buffer to be able to appease the neighbors and keep everybody happy.
So here's what I would recommend on that front is, if we're continuing the hearing, you can contact them outside of this meeting, should you like to make a proposal to them, they can accept or decline or whatever. That can go, to our records if you want to say this is what you're doing to try to mediate it. This is what they think about your opinions. You don't have to put any of that in either. But just outside this meeting, that's basically a dispute between neighbors. In the end, and whether what you guys would agree to, that could be, that could change them to saying they're in favor of you having geese. I don't know, but
That's not going to happen.
but
I still would like to not.
We don't need that. Okay, because these are your geese.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. It was her responsibility to come to us. We don't need snarkiness. If it was just a noise issue, I would be happy to work on that. But the predators are real.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
We're going in circles here.
Yep.
Well, it's just that two people have come up and said, "Oh no, it's not a problem." I live there, and I just want you to hear me on that. I see where they go.
We heard you.
Thank you.
We also
Thank
heard
you.
from experts. So thank you. Go ahead, Chris.
I'm a
We've
resident. I
seen
live there.
predators increase
Chris.
here.
Justin,
Yes, sir.
that would be if they could work together on the noise and come to something on the noise, it would be very helpful.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think, obviously anything they can do outside the process together to work together and collaborate and find a mutual process, that's obviously, I think the board would be responsive to that. What I would suggest is that there's no harm with the public hearing open as well to put that to the board, because at the end of the day, it's the board that has to be satisfied that the mitigations are sufficient.
Yeah. So if a plan were to be submitted to the board, which we've already talked about, wanting to see a plan showing the specific location of the geese enclosure relative to the property lines, if that plan were to show a line of evergreens between the geese enclosure and the property line, that I think that would tell the board that there is additional effort being made to control the noise, which, as I said before, is one of the considerations that we typically keep in mind for giving permission for horses on a relatively small parcel of land. Because the neighbors are likely to be concerned about the noise of the horses. So that would be right in line with what we would typically do for this. So if, as I said, if we were to see a plan showing the setbacks from the property line, showing any additional measures that you're proposing to take to, buffer this from the neighbors, that would certainly be looked upon with favor.
Thank you.
I do think if it's actually 7.5 feet, that I think it's going to have to move to 10 feet or go to the CBA for a variance.
Yeah, you might want to work with the building inspector's office on making sure that the setbacks have been met, so that ultimately they would be willing to issue the proper permit. So work with them on that, on what the plan needs to look like.
So that would be Mr. Berger's office?
Yes.
Okay.
I would send it into both, and me and Robert Berger can also collaborate to make sure that the plans are.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the point is, if you're gonna make a plan, let's make sure that it satisfies the needs of this board and of the building department for the permits that you will ultimately have to get from them in any case.
Okay.
Go ahead, Linda.
Okay, just a few words. I grew up with chickens, ducks, and geese. I grew up in Western Pennsylvania and in Maryland, and I had a grandmother who kept all of those. But with the wildlife business, I've been in this house for 50 years nearly on George Hill Road. When we first moved here, there were no turkeys. There were very few other critters around. Now, the turkeys sort of march through the yard. The deer sort of march through the yard. The coyotes march through the yard. I've had a fox kill a grouse right under our bedroom window. And I have dogs. Okay, you'd think that might be a deterrent, except one of them's little. The other one, no one cares about golden retrievers.
And the deer.
And
The deer wandered
Oh, well, the deer
inside of the bedroom.
Yeah, I mean, we just, that has been an ongoing increase that has been happening over these 50 years. Yep, same house. And none of those critters, we did not have turkeys when we first moved here. They were introduced, and boy, have they taken off with a vengeance. And they, by the way, are one of the things that really coyotes love. Wild turkey is probably high on their dinner list, not to mention all the rest of the critters that we have out here, squirrels, rabbits, and everything else. So I have to agree with the two experts. What you're seeing with wildlife is not something that the geese are attracting. It's right now this suburban, rural clash that's happened, where there's just been a huge increase in this kind of an area. And that's not going to change anytime soon. You can't hunt the coyote, and we got a lot of deer, and they'll take down deer. I just don't think the three geese have made a difference. I think it's all the rest of what's out there, and especially turkeys. And boy, you can have the turkeys because they're noisy. Anyway, but that's my 2 cents. I don't think that's an issue. And if they can address the noise, the goose noises, and yeah, geese can be noisy. They're funny too. But I think that that's something that neighbors have to work out. But don't blame those poor three geese for the increase in the predators. That's not what's doing it. There's too many animals in that area that would be attracting them. And by the way, house cats are also really high on the dinner list.
What's the sex of the geese?
We have one male, Tuca, and then we have two girls. One is Ollie and one is Finn.
Okay, because there was talk there that males tend to be
noisier.
And like the chickens, you can't have any males for backyard chickens for that very reason.
Yeah, but roosters crow.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm gonna pull this back in a little bit here.
Yes.
So I have the applicant made a verbal request to continue the hearing. Our next 2 dates to let you decide what you think, or you can even go further out than this if you want. This is mostly dependent on when you think you can have the material for us ready. Our next hearing date would be September 26th. And beyond that, October 3rd, October 24th, and we can go out from there if you want me to say as well.
I'm going to need to get a site plan, and I assume that you're willing to work with me for noise control, or?
Back to me.
I'm sorry.
Back to me. Basically, if they work with you outside of our process, that's one thing that would be better for your neighborhood, better for everyone involved. If you don't come to an agreement, and you may not have one to come to, I don't know.
Okay.
But if you don't come to an agreement, the board, who you have to satisfy that this is okay, is us.
Is the board.
So if you can, what you can do, outside of anything to, show that you can out mitigate the noise or do things to help with that, that would be what we're looking for. If you can show progress, if you find out that there is progress to be made, and you can want to push this out even further because you're making progress with your neighbors, that's something we can also do. You could send that to the town, and we can push the hearing out for that type of reason. But the idea that I'm looking for tonight is, when do you think you'll have more to bring to the board?
It's going to take more than a couple of weeks, just based on what needs to be done and my work schedule.
Okay. So
how about 4 weeks then? The second meeting out.
I can't accomplish this in 4 weeks. I'm sorry.
At some point, we started in January. Ongoing delay. Well, pick your date and we'll.
Could we target October 24th, which is a little over 4 weeks from now? If nothing else, we could always have a here's your current status, here's what you're working towards, here's when you've, contacted the surveyor, there,
Fair enough.
That kind of thing.
Fair enough.
We can go from there.
Yeah.
May I be heard one more time?
Not at this time. We're proceeding to keeping the hearing open. You can always submit further comment in email to the board, or through the town, or for our next hearing.
It's actually 6 weeks now.
Yes.
Suggesting.
Yeah, 'cause town
So
meeting is-
I have a request from the applicant to continue this hearing until October 24th. Do I have a motion from the board?
I move that we grant the applicant's request when it's filed in writing.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to continue this hearing until October 24th, pending a written request to continue. I'll take them.
I emailed that to you.
There's a form that I can, it's across the hall. I can
Okay.
grab it for you.
Thank you.
Or an email would work as well. But
I'll take the form.
So the vote of the board: Mr. Robbins,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
and I vote aye. I declare motion carried unanimously. We will pick this back up on October 24th.
Thank you.
I'll give a 5-minute recess just for you to grab her that form.
Does he continue according to?
Doing what?
Mr. Chair, I think you're done with me.
Yeah, you're more than welcome to stay on for further agenda items if you want, Mr. Berger, but
really want to,
we
Bob. I
do
know
not
it
need you.
excites me.
Yeah, I think I'll pass on that. If you need me, text me.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
All right. Everybody have a great night.
Yeah, you too.
Oh, well.
Now,
Back to our agenda.
yes, back to our agenda. If the board's amenable, I think we should take the first two discussion items before we do our decisions. That's the people that are here for them.
As long as we're not going to have problems if we happen to need to extend beyond 10.
I don't imagine us to have problems.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So, I'll jump ahead in our agenda to discussion items. Let's start with A, complaint Abbey Woods, DP 2020-01, 18 Carroll Road.
Thank you. So, this complaint was received in our office. It was forwarded from the building inspector, who was made aware of it. I believe the complaint was sent to the state, alleging a number of issues with the project. This was the first complaint I had received for this property, and immediately reached out to the developer in regards to the issues that were pertinent to the board and the management of the subdivision process. I believe my response was included in that meeting materials as well. So in terms of that, I did discuss with the developer, who expressed that they were aware of the hours of operation and would operate within those 7 to 5, Monday through Saturday, as included in the permit. The blasting has been completed. There's no more blasting to be taking place. And the dust control, which was another issue that was alleged, he mentioned that was understood that needs to be controlled on site. Frankly, I was going to include this as an item for correspondence, but obviously there was some discussion, due to the nature of the complaints that I did meet with other staff, the Board of Health, and the building inspector, to discuss the nature of the complaint and what was included. My understanding is that all of the issues that were brought up are at their various whatever appropriate agencies and authorities are in due process, and to that extent are under control. In terms of the issues for the board, I did take a ride out to the site, and I know Graves Engineering has been peer reviewing as well, and obviously the site is under construction, and I didn't notice anything immediately concerning in terms of the complaints that were held. That said, we'll continue to monitor the site. Certainly will be something that we'll keep in order. But given the discussion, I did want to allow the board the opportunity to weigh in on anything that they found pertinent. Obviously, moving forward, if there's additional direction that they'd like to see from staff, I'm happy to provide that support as well. I do note that in speaking with the developer today, they're unable to be at the meeting tonight, and if the board does wish to pursue this further, they would like the opportunity to speak with the board and to have their voice heard in the matter as well. So that's kind of the nature of the issue tonight, and I leave it to the board where they want to take this matter.
Anyone have comments or thoughts on the board side?
Well, I did not like the reference to collusion in the communique. I'm really not very happy about that. I think the person who sent that message also needs education on who does what and how, and they need to document when they had contacts and with whom about complaints and so on. I don't think there's anything for us at this point except to be sure that with whatever information we have, the best that we can do has been done.
Yeah, I think just the appropriate parties should continue to be aware of what's going on, paying attention. It's really all we can do. And, you know, we have, I mean, on our end of things, the enforcement of the conditions of the approval, and this is a subdivision approval. You know, the conditions are presumably, you know, between what Graves does regularly to monitor the project, anything that our staff does from time to time. Obviously, if we get a new complaint, we should be, you know, if it's one that's within our purview to respond to, we can respond to it. But beyond that, I don't know that the board needs to be contemplating any action. By and large, this board's enforcement authority is through the zoning
Yes.
enforcement officer and staff.
Yeah. Maybe the fire department in the case of the blasting. I'm not sure whether the local fire department gets into that, but I know that there's been reference to them in past about blasting.
Yeah, I think the local fire department has some involvement in blasting. That's primarily the state.
Yep. And I'll just say from the correspondence we have from the people, the townspeople who brought this to our attention, is that it was noted in the correspondence that they found the advice of getting a lawyer to be unhelpful. My commentary just to that point is, as far as I'm aware, us as the town is doing what we are needing to do, having been notified of the complaint. We're, you know, and if the people that are bringing this up feel that what the town is doing, what the developer is doing, is not appropriate, they need to have representation for their own interests to pursue it in whatever way they need to. And that is just how I would treat it. And yeah, a lawyer will be the one to give you that advice on what is actually possible.
No.
Oh, I keep
Go ahead, Chris.
So I guess the only other item that I would offer for the board's consideration tonight, you know, the progress of this subdivision is certainly well underway. Much of the road is already paved. There's still some sidewalk infrastructure and curbing that will need to go in, as well as additional infrastructure, and utilities are being laid. The board has issued lot releases for 3 of the lots. So that may be it. You know, if the board does want to ask for additional information in terms of future lot release requests, that may be another opportunity to address this. But at this time, I you know,
yeah,
that's what I would offer.
Makes sense. All right, I guess we're done with that agenda item. Our next discussion item is Grafton Land Trust and drainage for Stillwater Estates, 11 Wheeler Road, DP 2020-02. And you can come up, Mr. Aberg, if you like. I suspect you'll have things to add to this discussion.
Okay.
I'm guessing.
I think this is Rob Aberg, and paper on the floor, 43 South Street. So I'm representing Grafton Land Trust tonight with charge of the board. And I'm also communicating through Attorney Swirda with the board on some of the other work we're doing with Developers Council. I sent some information. I hope the board has had a chance to review the storm observations from the 26th of August and the 5th and 6th of September. You can see for yourself going back to our deliberations in 2019, 2020, maybe even in 2018, the concern about the trail and making sure it remained passable and in fact improved. And so a waiver was granted for the roadway to the betterment of something in the town, which was determined to be the local trail. That was an amount of $13,000, if you'll recall. And since that time, I had met in 2020 with Kristen Labrie of the engineering firm that did the stormwater management report. And at the time, there was going to be an infiltration basin. Joe Layden was there in attendance with me. He also saw it's going to be an infiltration basin. And at that time, the only flow that would occur from this basin was over the emergency overflow weir on a 100-year storm. So I agreed to that at that date. Later, there was a request for a waiver, which passed through me. I didn't notice it. But the request for the waiver was to discharge water within some short distance of the property through a 18-inch discharge line. That discharge line has since been constructed, and in those two storms, you can see the muddy, silty flow passing through the construction barriers, flowing onto the trail, depositing silt, and then flowing off into the river. If you'll recall, or maybe you weren't involved, but with Conservation Commission, just the stormwater runoff from the road onto the trail caused the Blackstone Water Conservation Coalition or someone to say that, hey, the state's going to fine you if you allow silt into the river. And so we worked with DPW and fixed that. I don't know if you're involved with that at all, but Paul Knoyer fixed everything there. We haven't had any problems since until recently. And now we have all this muddy flow coming out of the discharge pipe. Even in these small storms, even a 15-minute storm was flowing water down the trail, muddy water coating all the leaves and running off into the river. Then I went out again last week on September 6th or whatever the camera says. And I again documented the muddy silted plume flowing onto the trail at, it's a flow. It's not a clear standing water puddle. It's a muddy flow coming onto the trail. And so there's no way that $13,000 is going to help mitigate that. So what we've got is a deteriorating situation that's getting worse and worse with each storm. And that's just on the discharge pipe of the trail. We have other matters that we're bringing up with Concom soon. So we're very concerned. Attorney Swerda, in his letter of August 17th, asked the board to consider your powers granted, to planning boards to look at amending, modifying, or rescinding building permits. So that's within your power, and you can consider those. And additionally, after the storm, I sent 4 more things to consider, 2 for the Conservation Commission to look at measuring the siltage and flow to see if it's exceeding the standards for such a detention basin now. That's not an infiltration basin really anymore. And then for the planning board to consider, are the community benefits being met by this development and the work that was done? So I just want to make sure that you're fully aware of the deteriorating conditions on the trail, and that we're also working in a separate channel discussing with the developer's attorney. Do you have any questions?
Anything to add, Chris? Or?
Mike's not there. Attorney Swart is not there tonight, is he?
No. He's working on a letter, he told me.
Yeah. The thing is that, well, first I mentioned last time that I sort of know him since he was on the planning board when I joined it, and we were together for, I don't know, 2-3 years.
Oh, wow.
So wanted to say hello, but mostly I wanted to say that even though that's like 30 years, I think what he's talking about is section 81W of the law. And he just said 81, and 81 has about at least 20 or maybe 30 different sections, but I think it's W. And I can't remember over all those years us ever exercising that power. So I'm a little shaky on exactly how to proceed with it, but I'm all in favor of doing what we can.
Yes, so am I.
I'm really not happy. I understood that this was going to be okay, and apparently it's not going to be okay. I think we should do whatever we can to accelerate stopping what's happening right now and finding out why. It's finding out what the problem is. We may need to get our engineers to look the situation over and tell us. I don't know whether we can make any motions tonight to take action. Perhaps we can. But I think we're going to need a little educating on everything that we can do with 81W. I'd like to, well, I'm inclined to say suspend the approval while we inspect and while we find out what's wrong.
I kind of agree on this. We drove through and we looked at this situation a little bit, and Bob walked back the pathway. I couldn't do it. And you know, and the bottom line is the town's going to be responsible for that. So I think we need to hold the builder responsible until we can they can give us a real reason why this is happening. And I think we've got to do something, whatever we have the power to do.
On their point, did you have anything, Chris?
So, I mean, I think what I want to mention is I think there's a number of complexities to this issue currently. What I don't want to give is the impression that from these complaints that staff has done nothing. Quite the opposite, in fact, and maybe that will help a little bit if I kind of go through what I have been working on to address this issue. First and foremost, in terms of the documentation that was submitted from the land trust for that's the matter for tonight. I did provide that to town council. It's similar to an item that was discussed previously this year, and her recommendation in terms of that I received it via email today, so I haven't uploaded it. But largely the crux of her recommendation is that there is a matter in terms of the easement and that dispute between the land trust and the developer, and largely that matter is between those two parties and not the purview of the board. Certainly in terms of managing the project, as Mr. Hassinger and Mrs. Hassinger have noted, the board has that authority and does have the authority to reconsider the project if they feel is necessary and amend the language as needed to provide clarity in their decision. I, likewise to what has been discussed, am not well versed in that, and would look to town council probably to provide some kind of direction in that path, because it's certainly not a normal course of action or a regular process. I did also reach out to Graves Engineering to get some input on what's being seen. He has not been out to the site during the rain events, but I did provide him that information, and understanding now that there's an issue, he did say that he will go out and take a look at the next rain event to collect some more input from an engineering perspective. I've also been out to the site numerous times since we've received notice from the land trust. Most notably, I'd have to go back on the calendar to find the dates, but there was the one large downpour that we had approximately 2 weeks ago. I did go out not during that, but approximately the Wednesday following, so approximately 4 or 5 days after that, and did note that the water on the trail had dissipated. So it's not necessarily standing water for weeks on end. I did also go. We had approximately a 3-day rainstorm just last week. I went on the second day of that during the rain event to look at the trail. Certainly there was standing water on the trail, similar to the photos that were presented in the materials from the Grafton Land Trust, and the trail certainly was impassable at that time. I also took a look at the site from the Land Trust property, looking at the drain pipe and the erosion control in that area. I wasn't able to find any evidence of the erosion control being overwhelmed by the rain event. I'm not an engineer, but to my understanding, the infiltration pipe that comes out of the drainage basin was operating appropriately. That's something I would like to get an engineering perspective on, certainly, because I'm not well versed in that. But from preliminary discussions with Graves and trying to understand how that operates, again, I'm sure Jeff Walsh would explain it much better than I can. But the overall concept of the drainage infrastructure that was implemented is that certainly there is some concentrated flow, but that the flow that is discharged onto the Land Trust property is no more than would normally be done under normal circumstances. It's just more concentrated. In order to mitigate that, and what was included in the board's approved plans and was peer review engineered or reviewed by the peer review engineer, is that there was infrastructure to in place to dissipate the water or prevent erosion of that property. Certainly, I think the erosion control is doing some of that work. When I was out on site, again, not being a stormwater engineer, I would defer to Graves, but I didn't see any evidence of vegetation being pushed over or silty flow that would indicate that that there's significant erosion being done on the site at that time. Again, that's one rain event at one point in time. I'm not saying that it's not possible to be occurring, but that's my understanding and what I did from receiving the notice to this time. So, but I'll continue to review it and reach out to Jeff Walsh. But I think largely, given town council input, that it may be a matter between two parties. My understanding was that mediation was underway, and that the last I had heard was that was proceeding, fairly well. So I was hoping that could be resolved between the two parties promptly. But that's my input for now.
Thank you. Now, you were waiting so patiently.
I respect your time in the hour, so I promise to be brief, but I do appreciate the opportunity to be heard. My name is Rob Knappich, and I'm counsel to Brad Wright and Wright Realty Trust, and I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the trust perspective of what's transpired. I mean, this is a project that was vetted by the board, as you know. It issued 2 permits. It was vetted by the Conservation Commission. Mr. Wright bought what he believed was a fully permitted project, and it is a fully permitted project. We were surprised to get contacted by Attorney Sawardra demanding on behalf of the Land Trust that we request an easement and make some additional contributions to trail improvement or mitigation. But from the applicant or the developer's perspective, as I think was stated, I've been to the site twice. I went there in July, which admittedly didn't tell me a lot about stormwater or, the potential for off-site drainage issues given the time of the year and the nature of the rainfall that we've had this year. I went there again this evening because I saw the pictures that were submitted to you. And frankly, I didn't see what those pictures show. I don't think you will either. I would encourage you to visit the site. It's very accessible from the parking lot that's near 122 and the Conseguiman River. You can walk along the trail. You can go right to the spot that's shown. For silt to flow onto the Land Trust property and over it into the river would be almost to defy gravity. I don't doubt that there was silt within a section of the trail during a rain event when this gentleman went there. I don't doubt that because the trail is in a wetland and the trail is worn in such a way that it's essentially a ditch. So of course, any rain that falls as quickly as an inch in only an hour is going to generate a certain amount of siltation on that site, and it's going to collect in the trail, which is essentially a ditch. I wasn't there. I don't know that that happened. It could have been what happened. All I'm telling you is if you look at the vegetation between the detention basin outfall and the property line, today anyway, I saw no evidence of siltation. And I think Mr. McGoldrick's observations are consistent with that. In any event, I would ask if the board is going to take action that we have the opportunity to submit some written response or some sort of a brief or something that explains our position further. But in a nutshell, I agree with town council's apparent opinion that the need for an easement is a private matter between the land trust and the developer. As far as community benefit, I think if you read the decisions, and I have, the benefit has been paid, it's been realized. The decision contemplates that the applicant, in exchange for a waiver, will confer a benefit in the form of trail improvements to the Grafton Land Trust. And they'll work with the Land Trust to design trail improvements up to the sum of $13,000. The applicant, the prior owner, paid the Land Trust that $13,000. That in effect is, not in effect, that is, as I think the applicant understood it, and we certainly did, I don't see how anybody, you could understand it otherwise, that's the benefit. I don't read the decisions to say that there's an ongoing obligation to continue to confer a benefit for, remote or speculative or potential damage to the trails, which we don't believe will happen because the detention basin was designed properly and we believe it's functioning properly. So I can put myself in your shoes because I sit on a board in my little town and I understand that you're weighing various points of view and you need to come to your own conclusion. I'm giving you the developers and I'm asking that before you take action, you view the site, have Graves view the site, and give us an opportunity to respond to whatever action you contemplate. Thank you.
Graves have to.
Yeah.
We have to.
I'm interested in Graves' perspective on this from an engineering perspective as to, whether there is any action that the board could take in terms of the potential for modifying the permission, the approval, or any other action that the board needs to take. But I would very much be interested in hearing Graves' analysis of the situation before I contemplate what action the board might take.
Yeah. Well,
I'll
go
just go
ahead.
briefly to that. I echo the Hassinger's concerns. I also would want, Graves to review it before I would make any decision on my end. I also would want town council to give us an opinion on what options does the board have, whether Graves' answers support those options or not. What options the board have and how we would go about doing XYZ for those options. That I think is worth getting input on. I would like to, from my seat, ideally have all these answers for us in time for our next meeting. I don't know that town council and Graves can move that fast for this particular issue, but I would love it for our next meeting. And by nature of having our options laid out to us later on, that would give the land trust and the developer an opportunity to submit anything further if they had additional thoughts as well for the board's perusal, given that information.
Yeah, I certainly could provide the email that was sent to me today for the board to consider at their next meeting. I'll coordinate with Ginny. I don't want to speak for her that she could turn around a formal opinion on those matters prior to the next meeting, but I'll
Yeah.
certainly ask if that's possible, and try to have that done. In terms of graves, similarly, they're aware of the issue, and I'm sure they'll give additional attention during their normal site inspections. And as mentioned, he'll certainly, at the next rain event, will likely try to prioritize getting out to the site to view how that infrastructure is operating, and I'll probably coordinate a site visit with him as well.
Yeah. The overall idea for me in having this on, relatively speaking, like an urgency kind of answer to us as a board is, if there is issues from the current state of this development to the land trust trail and land trust property, I would love to know that if the board could do something to alleviate that, that we could. And to be completely clear, I'm talking about issues relating to the development itself, not something that was prior, pre-existing. And I would like us to be able to have our options, on a legal standpoint, laid out that yes, we can tell the developer they have to stop, and here's what you might need to, to have as answers for why you can tell the developer to stop and what you need to assert, or no, you can't. The building inspector might have to do that, or many other, whatever the options are.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't want to monopolize time.
Kind of two points. On the private matter between the developer and the land trust, in the first instance, yes, I don't know what rights one has as to discharging water across someone else's property and that sort of thing. But when I voted on these things, I understood that we had a satisfactory and agreeable arrangement. It appears that that was not correct. And therefore, I would ask that we be prepared at the earliest opportunity, if we decide we need to take action relative to relating to our responsibility. And to that end, then I would like our agenda and any following agendas to be crafted in such a way that we could take action. In other words, we could make this. I don't think with what we had on the agenda tonight that we could actually take an action. At least it wouldn't be a very good idea.
Understood.
Okay.
Understood. Yeah.
And pass on to Ginny about my point about our responsibility. And
right. Yep. Understood. And I will certainly do that. I just want to mention kind of to the chairman's comment about the Graves review. I just want to be clear. I think that's something where the roles and responsibilities needs to be clearly defined too. Where I think a review from Graves, what again, I don't want to speak for them, but what I imagine could be offered is that is not that they would propose solutions, but they could look at the existing infrastructure and indicate that it is working to the approved design, or if there are deficiencies in it, they could certainly note that, and that would certainly be within the board's purview to take action on. In discussing with Graves, they have mentioned it, again, it's not their role to propose engineering solutions.
Agreed.
In terms of negotiating, again, it's matter between two parties, but if there's a benefit to negotiating any amendments to that infrastructure, that may prove beneficial if the applicant wanted to have their engineer take another look at it, if there's mitigating measures that they can put in place that amends that situation. Again, that would happen outside the process for the board, but that's certainly something that could be done, and if Grays, needs to peer review that, that can be coordinated as well. So, I just wanted to kind of clarify those roles a little bit.
I spent a while trying to thread my way through what's online from this case, and I didn't necessarily find everything I wanted. Little hard headache after I got done headache. But wasn't there a reference to granting, well, a permission of some sort to move closer to the property line with some of this? And if I'm remembering that reference in one of the letters, then that would be one of the things that I was talking about, working on an understanding of that.
Yeah, I'd have to go back to the material. That does strike, I remember something like that, but the specifics similarly, I can't recall those, but I'll take another look and I'll include that when I forward information to Ginny as well for her review.
And if there's something, if we could somehow get some help to find it, so that we can look at it also, that would be good.
Okay, will do.
Okay. Enough said?
Anyone have any remarks that have not already been said? Even both of you?
We both want geese.
I've had someone actually text me asking if they can get geese now. But I guess.
But were they for the geese or against the geese?
I think they were joking, asking me if they could have geese.
Oh. Well, depend. How many acres have they got?
Less than 5. But anyway,
Oh,
moving on.
All right. The time is
Yes, the time is 9:38.
9:38.
Let's call this discussion on Wheeler Road complete for the time being. And
thank you. And
thank you.
hopefully, amongst all of us, we can get this resolved.
All right. Now let's take the agenda from the top. Draft decision, modification of a site plan approval for 308 Providence Road. Factory Cat Inc.
The only comment I had in their draft decision is that I was not in fact present for that hearing. The draft decision said that I was. And this was just, ultimately, is just for an extension of time.
Right. Nor was I at the meeting, so. And I'm sorry about that.
This is.
Well, we managed to muddle through without you, apparently.
Okay. I thought it was
I
more of
move
a formality
Yeah.
to extend the original special permit.
Yeah. Did
I have a motion to approve the draft decision as drafted.
with
Second.
the modification, with the one modification noted.
Yes, exactly, with the one modification noted. Do I have a second?
I heard
Second.
Linda second.
Okay. I have a motion and a second to approve the draft decision with the one modification previously noted. Mr. Robbins,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
and I vote aye. I declare this decision approved. The staff will reach out to you with the final paperwork on it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Our next agenda item is also a draft decision, modification of a special permit and site plan approval for Alfonso Village, 100 Westboro Road.
For what it's worth, when I read through the decision, nothing caught my eye as needing to be changed.
I didn't notice anything either.
Yeah, I guess just as discussion items, I do note that Ezek Petrie, the representing the applicant, is on the call tonight as well. But there was a couple of conditions that were amended notably for amending the affordability criteria to reflect the unit counts. And that was included in this draft as well.
I noticed that,
All right.
and as far as I could tell, the math was correct on it, for what that's worth.
All right. Do I have a motion?
Move the board approve the draft decision as written.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I got a second. All right. I have a motion and a second to approve the draft decision as written. Mr. Robbins,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Veckatraman,
Aye.
and I vote aye. I declare the motion carried unanimously, and this decision is approved, and we'll get the paperwork out. All right. Our next agenda item, general bylaw update request for feedback from the bylaw study committee.
Yep. So I wanted to put this on it as a discussion item, and I think there's still some time to certainly to address this if we want to push it, given the hour of the night. But certainly something for us to be looking at. I know we did update our subdivision rules and regs, but certainly we should be looking at the bylaws and what we can do to better those. And
Yes, the bylaw study committee asks for this board's suggestions for updates to the general bylaws. The committee specifically would like the planning board to look at the scenic roads bylaw and the shade tree bylaw, because those two specifically involve the planning board. The bylaw committee asks for the board's input by the 14th of October, so that the bylaw committee can sort of we are at the moment collecting suggestions and recommendations from basically pretty much everybody who's named in the bylaw as being responsible in some sense for the various articles. So any suggestions the planning board has, I've noted a couple myself from the planning board's perspective, but I'd love to hear the suggestions from the rest of the board. We don't have to dig into it tonight, as you said, Chris, but, ideally, we'd like to get your input by the 14th of October.
Yeah. Well, while we're at it, not too long ago, it seems to me that we, or at least I, talked a little bit about the need to have be clearer about enforcement of violations,
Yes.
didn't I?
Yes,
And I think that's a real thing to talk about.
My note on the scenic roads bylaw includes, how about some teeth?
One thing that came up tonight as well is the warrant bylaw change from Westboro for the animal control. That animal control officer handed the paperwork. Did you get a copy, Chris?
I did.
Yeah.
All right. I would suggest maybe at least scanning this in, sending it out to the entirety of the board. That way, we can talk about it at our next meeting if we want to forward this as an idea to the bylaw study committee.
So the bylaw studying committee is in possession of of the Westboro animal control bylaw. But yes, I think it would be appropriate for the board to review that and make some recommendation to the bylaw committee as to whether something like this ought to be considered.
Yeah. There was an issue, I think it's zoning. There was an issue about 3 dogs or 4 dogs being a threshold 2-3 years ago. The previous town clerk brought it up. I'm not sure whether that's in zoning or in general.
It might have been the general bylaw on dogs.
Well,
I'm
it's a
not
question.
sure about
You need a kennel. You need a kennel license.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that discussion somewhere.
Yeah, we ought to try to see if it's within the scope of what we're talking about.
I think that's all on this agenda item for tonight.
Yeah, The bylaw committee didn't expect this, the planning board, to discuss it at any length at this particular meeting.
Yeah, well, while we're thinking about it,
But yes, collect any ideas we have.
right.
All right, it's looking like it'll be a very tight fit to get in before 10. Anyone want to make that motion now?
I move that we vote to extend the meeting beyond 10 o'clock.
Second.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Robbins.
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Venkataraman.
Aye.
And I vote aye. We're allowed to go past 10 o'clock. We don't turn to mud.
Yes. Yeah, just, yeah, I shouldn't even say anything, but I will very briefly, that although Robert's rules doesn't cover this specific sort of a motion, it seems to be in the category of motions that Robert's rules says are not subject to debate. But we've never debated it in all the times we've had to make that motion, so it's kind of a non-issue.
Anyway.
Moving on.
Moving on. Complete streets discussion and update.
Well, I'm gonna play my favorite game of still trying to make it for 10 o'clock anyways. So complete
Okay.
streets update. Very quickly, I have that work is ongoing. We held one of our first public hearings on this matter, or public workshops, I should say, not hearings. I apologize. Public workshops looking specifically, we targeted the senior center for a discussion. Had a very lively discussion in terms of road infrastructure and sidewalk infrastructure and trails that are needed in town from the senior center community. So that was really beneficial. I'm sure that CMRPC will be setting up an additional public workshop. One of the things that we're looking at is if there are events or dates coming up that we can kind of piggyback off of a larger event, certainly not town meeting, but if there's other things that are happening in the town, please let me know, and I'm happy to try and piggyback on those. I'll also be coordinating with Evan to see if there's any other events. It could be anything from a festival coming up or any other kind of event that sees a lot of attendance that we can kind of try to generate some support. And obviously road infrastructure, bike infrastructure included. If there's a coalescence with that, that would be even more beneficial. But that's my update for that.
All right. Any discussion on that from the board? Everyone's got to hit by 10. MBTA zoning.
So similarly, I was in attendance for the first webinar. Still some outstanding questions, I think, that haven't yet been clarified. There's still plenty of webinars through the next month that will be happening, provided by the state and their agencies, that I have scheduled to be in attendance at. I'm happy to give more of an update at the next meeting. We can start to talk about potential solutions and what the outstanding questions that me and I have spoken a little bit with Dave as well about who I know was attending those webinars as well, in terms of some of the outstanding questions that we still have for specifically for Grafton and meeting those requirements.
Yeah, so if you want to spend just a moment, I'd refer to an extremely brief presentation highlighting, what's new, what they finally came out with. If you want to put that up on the screen, Chris. So the final guidelines were issued on August 10th, and there was a number of interesting changes from the preliminary guidelines that they issued back in December. But I've highlighted here just a couple of points that were, I think, particularly significant for Grafton. And one is that there's a brand new classification. They had the old guidelines had 4 classifications: the transit, bus, commuter rail, and adjacent communities. They've eliminated the bus, but they've sort of taken commuter rail, and it's actually the new adjacent community category is anybody with either a commuter rail or a transit station but with less than 100 acres of developable station area. There's another community, there's an adjacent small community category as well, which we would fit into if our population was only 1/3 of what it is. But for us, they calculate that we actually have less than 100 acres of developable station area within a half a mile of the MBTA station here in Grafton. They calculated, and the next slide shows how that was calculated. Only 82 acres out of that big area. So, the consequences of being an adjacent community are that the total amount of multifamily capacity that we have to zone for is less. It's only 776 units. Our previous calculation was 15% of our housing. It's now 10%. Further, helpful for us in terms of flexibility, none of that multifamily zone is required to be within the station area. We're still required to zone for at least 50 acres of multifamily, but it could be anywhere in town, with the only real constraint being that there needs to be at least 25 contiguous acres. So we'd be looking for an area somewhere in town that's at least 25 acres big, one lot or several lots together, for this multifamily zone. And again, we have some flexibility in time too. Our deadline is December 31st of 2024. So we've got some time to work on this. But this picture here shows how the 82 acres was calculated. And basically they exclude all publicly owned land. They exclude all educational institutional use, which basically takes Tufts land entirely out of the picture. They also exclude rights-of-way. That shouldn't be surprising. Rivers, streams, lakes, and ponds, none of which are in our area. Title V buffers, which are in the area, and that basically, the Title V buffer largely took up most of 4 Millennium Drive in Centec Park. But what's left after excluding all these things is the developable station area, which is Centec Park, all of Centec Park and a little bit beyond it. So that's how they calculated it. That's how we became an adjacent community, is because so much of the land around our station area was excluded. But this is based on data that's a couple of years old now. So there's 3 changes that would change this calculation, and that's what's shown on the following slide. The 3 changes relative to what they use for the calculation are 4 Millennium Drive in Centec Park, which, because of all the wetlands on it, WBDC handed that over to the town. So that is now town-owned. That's that pink area that Chris is highlighting. It's now town-owned, and it's also permanently protected. It's under conservation control. So that now is excluded from the 82 acres. On the other hand, 8 Pine Street, the North Grafton Transit Village Overlay District, is no longer owned by any public agency. So it would now be included as developable station area. And that ownership has already been transferred, so that's done. The Mass Development parcel is still owned by Mass Development, but it is slated to be turned over for private development. So at some point in time, that would become included in the developable station area. But with those 3 changes that we know about, we're still less than 100 acres. This adds up to 96.9 acres. So one of the reasons I've made this map and did this calculation was on the possibility that these changes in eligibility for the land would put us up over the 100 acres, which would increase our multifamily capacity requirements. But no, interestingly enough, it still keeps us under the 100 acres. So that's where we're at. And that's kind of, I'll give the caveat that this is my interpretation of the guidelines as to what's included and excluded. I don't know for a fact that their calculation is exactly like this, but I came up with the same number they did, so I'm pretty sure. Moving forward, as I said, we've got a fair amount of flexibility, and it's looking a lot more flexible than the old guidelines. So we do have time to work on this. We can talk more at some future time, but now now the rubber meets the road. We have to actually figure out what we're going to set up as a multifamily zoning district. But we don't have to figure that out tonight. Just kind of wanted to bring to the board this, what the new guidelines look like for Grafton.
Dave, I'm not quite sure what the color coding is. The orange, call it reddish, where it says Tufts and
Yeah.
job color. That's definitely not. Oh, down there. Okay.
Yes,
I'm
in
trying
the
to figure
fine
out about.
print, you'll see the color key.
Right. Well, but the color that's under UPS and the more remote parts of Tufts.
Yeah, so those ultimately what's outlined here are the lots that are all or partly within the station area. So the gray area is outside the station area, but it's a lot that's partially in, part in and part out. So the gray is the part that's outside. The more colorful part is within that half-mile circle.
Yeah. Since nothing's happening on the UPS site, I wonder about the developability question, or I'm not sure whether it's a question, but what would happen if the UPS property, the whatever it was called before, received this zoning, knowing that you couldn't develop it with the rules we have because of the length of dead ends, at least unless you could also, in addition, make the connection that UPS was working on.
Go ahead, Chris.
I guess.
Just interested in how the rules work.
Yeah, that's certainly something that I think is an outstanding question of that was in talking about one of the comments that was made during the public hearing process before the final guidelines, talking about, zoning the Job Corps in Tufts, which may be why that's included now, this excluded from developable station area kind of a thing. But that was one of the questions of, if you zone something that is unlikely to be developed in the near future, does it still comply? And I don't think there's ever been a real clear response on that. What I would kind of say in terms of the UPS property and what can be developed under the existing zoning, I would say that I would never underestimate the creativity of developers, especially with lips and such. So definitely understand the comment, but I'm also have seen some very creative solutions to get things developed in ways that are maybe outside of what the zoning contemplated.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm not, if it can be developed, fine.
Yeah.
That's a good sized chunk in Grafton. I'd rather it be non-residential, but it's doing nothing. And so if someone could develop it, it's close to the train station, and the area that we're getting some of that. So as long as the subdivision rules don't get in the way, then that's something we can think about.
Yeah, and when we're the zoning that we are going to be asked to put into place here is not necessarily any of the types of zones that we currently have in Grafton, because this has to be basically multifamily by right. And the rules, if we were to create a brand new type of zone, multifamily by right, we can write the rules as we need them to make it work, to satisfy the state's requirements for compliance with this zoning. So that's in terms of where we write this zone, how we write the rules, as long as it ends up being by right. Site plan review is allowed, special permit is not. But short of that, we're likely to be creating some new types of zoning, because the only zoning we have in town right now that seems to comply with the rules are the 40R. We got two 40Rs, one of which is currently being developed, one of which is not yet developed. together they add up to probably no more than 20 acres of developable land. But the 40R rules come pretty close to satisfying the MBTA requirements. None of our other zones do that. So we'll be inventing a new zone, and we can invent the rules that make it work.
Yeah, and
Might we not be doing an overlay, not an actual zone?
That's a possibility.
But yeah, I'll say just to my own understanding and thought processes, if Grafton or really any town that this falls into has their own rules that could be waived, even if the current boards in those towns are unlikely to waive them, that could still be construed pretty easily as this is developable. The board just may not approve it, but if there's a waiver that could be given,
yeah.
it's potential that a future board of, even if it's completely different members, would find that waiver in the same circumstances reasonable.
That may or may not satisfy their rules.
Yeah, that's the trick.
Because the one thing that they've made pretty clear is we have to, however we do it, whether it's a base zone or an overlay zone, but it's pretty clearly stated that it has to be by right. That is, the town cannot block it.
My main point in that thought is would that be within their 100-acre, would that bring us over the 100 acres because it is developable even though we would have to grant the waiver.
No.
That's separate than the
Right.
the 40.
The 100 acres is what happens within this circle.
Yes.
That's all. Nothing outside this circle affects that.
Yep.
Okay.
I keep thinking of Winnie the Pooh.
Oh, yeah?
100-acre wood.
Oh.
Yes.
Never mind. Are we done with this subject?
This is more than I planned to talk about on this, actually. I really didn't want to do much more than show the pictures so we can have a good visual sense of how we got to be where we are in the categories.
And if I didn't say it already, can you try to remember that when this next comes up on our agenda for further discussion, we just have this presentation attached?
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe it ought to be, well, someplace on the website.
Yeah. Available and linked is my main point.
Yeah, I mean,
And
it's in
find
the
them.
materials for tonight, but
yeah.
But yes,
You
if
could
we
probably make a project page for it.
right, and that's because ultimately we will be doing more, gathering more information about this. So yes, and the MBTA zoning project page would include this.
Yeah.
For me.
There's a new website coming, it's going to change everything.
The new town website, that's a whole nother topic.
Moving on, hazard mitigation plan review. Revisions.
So a quick update on this is that we did submit this obviously to the state. We received back comments looking for some revisions after their review. The consultant at this time has already completed all of those revisions and has just one or two last kind of items that they're wrapping up before they submit it back to the state for their final review and approval. Penultimate. So I'm hoping that is wrapped up very shortly.
Sure.
But I did include those for the board tonight.
Whoever's got the screen can give it up now.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's such a pretty picture. You don't want to keep watching it all night? After
No.
all the work I put into making that picture.
No, I like the picture that I do this with two screens or with two windows. And right now Bill's got a nicer than usual framing, so I can actually see you guys on the second screen, which is where that appears for me.
Do we need to do anything?
Yeah, Bill.
Any specifics on the hazard mitigation revisions, or we?
No, nothing that I think warrants a kind of really deep discussion tonight, unless the board would like to. But those items are included certainly, if there's something that the board would like to see, I'm happy to reach out to the consultant and.
Sooner or later, we would expect to see the revised hazard mitigation plan posted on the website.
Yep.
Who's doing the work?
VHB, the consultant's Carissa Mills.
Okay. Yeah, no, I looked at that and I'm not about to guess what we should do.
Yeah,
Gonna have to rely on the
started working
consultant. I think.
When did we start working that hazard mitigation plan? Early last year? Was it even the fall of 2020?
So, yeah. It's been a while.
Yeah.
We're almost there.
All right. Bills.
Move the bills be
We
approved.
move, we say they're okay.
I hear two motions. I'll take one as a second.
Works.
Any discussion? All right, Mr. Robbins.
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
And I vote aye. I declare the bill is approved and the motion carried unanimously. No minutes of previous meeting, I believe. Staff report.
I think everything
The
I had was.
correspondence, there was,
I'm
Doesn't
calling
that-
the agenda order. Staff report first.
Everything that was covered in discussion items, I'm fine. So.
Okay. Correspondence.
There
That
was an
was your chance,
email regarding. I read that. Is that something we should discuss?
I see, yes, you're right. What did you want to discuss?
There's an email in the correspondence.
Oh, yeah, no, but he's gonna do, I was only looking at the ones that have links, and I skipped over the staff report. Do we have staff report or no?
He covered it all already, he said.
Yeah,
Okay.
the discussion items were sufficient.
Yeah, there's a complaint in the correspondence.
That's not really our,
Yeah.
our,
I'll say it's
Yeah.
not it's not our purview. Is that something that you could at
Is
least
it-
reach out to direct them?
Is it
Chris?
the email from this morning, Monday, the 12th?
The Old Meadow Lane needs paving and
Yes. So certainly that was received today. I haven't reached out yet, but certainly will. I think more appropriately, given the progress we're making on the complete streets, I think that would be something that we can try to include this in the complete streets process, and that would certainly be there. So I'll certainly reach out to the person who emailed this and mention that process to hopefully get them engaged in that, and I think that would be more appropriate.
Yeah, and how to direct them, of course, for how to approach getting sidewalks and if speed bumps, if it's appropriate, that kind of thing is not really our purview for existing roadways, but there's other avenues they could approach to try to make that happen.
It's somewhere between the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator, I think, is the place that goes, because they're the ones, in the end, they're the ones that are approving where.
And to an extent, the
Well,
traffic
money is
safety
going.
committee as well.
Mhm.
Is it to an extent the traffic safety committee as well in regards to them wanting speed bumps?
Yeah, well, I don't think that the speed bumps are even,
we
something
have
that they can
speed
do.
bumps.
Oh, we have speed bumps. The town's nicely provided them all over our road.
Our road is one huge speed bump.
Well, it used to be called a road. Never
Yes.
mind.
One might question the use of the term road.
Also, in
Yes.
relation to correspondence, the one thing I noticed in local-ish news recently is that the old location of Fairway Beef is likely to get but I don't remember where in the process they were, but a 9-story apartment complex.
Mm-hmm.
And then just right near that, we have in our correspondence something going on with 44 Grafton Street as well. So it's all in Worcester, nothing that's in our purview directly, and nothing I think we need to spend more time on, but I figured to say it out loud.
Well, that'll probably make it impossible to get into Worcester from Grafton Street, don't you think?
Mhm.
It'll be too much traffic.
Oh, yeah.
Shouldn't we tell them that?
But anyway, Reports from planning board representatives on town committees and CMRPC.
Now, I'll have something here. It's not, I'm not exactly a planning board this is not so much me as a planning board representative on something else, but I did have the opportunity to attend the solar celebration this afternoon up at Knowlton's, where they built the solar array that we approved 3 years back that was supposed to be compatible with agriculture. Specifically was being designed to as sort of an experiment in combining traditional agriculture with solar generation. So we had a chance to hear some talks about that, how that project has been going, a chance to tour the array as such as it is. It was interesting. I think it sounds like the project is doing very well. Paul has basically got several head of cattle grazing around the pylons of the solar array, and seemingly doing quite well. He's been working on planting the stuff that they need to graze on, and they seem to be happy with the progress so far. It's being, they're also growing more traditional crops under the at least some of the array on the northern side of Estabrook Road. Unfortunately, they were running late, so I didn't have a chance to see that. But it sounds like, in all respects, they're doing very well, getting good results so far in terms of being able to combine traditional agriculture and a solar farm.
Good. There is, I get a whole lot of mailings from CMRPC. So I'm not sure, I'm not quite clear whether any of them have been passed on to you. They're doing meetings around the region on the 2050 plan. And I saw that they're going to be in Grafton soon. And people might like to go, make themselves aware of it, and go and at least listen, if not contribute, because that's a very serious effort being made to build a good plan for looking to the future. They are really putting a lot of energy in.
Yeah, I sat in on a couple of their visioning sessions that did it online and on Zoom a while back. Very interesting.
Yeah, I saw your hand, Chris. You might be able to say what I was going to suggest is that we get from your office probably a short 1 or maybe 2 sentence thing to send to the select board to use as an announcement of that upcoming date.
That's a great idea. I can certainly do that and make a little blurb to provide to the select board. Yep, I will do that. What I was going to mention, just a shameless plug for the surveys that were provided by CMRPC. We have paper surveys out in front of our office as well as at the library, and it's also available on their website. And if you haven't, it's a very quick survey, but a great way to get some comments included in the process. So recommend it.
All right. Anything more that may lawfully come before the board?
I move we adjourn.
Motion and a second. No discussion. Mr. Robbins.
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Miss Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
And I vote aye. We are adjourned. Thank you all.
Good night.